Okay, good afternoon. I am John Ture, lecturer at the BroadCast College. Okay, on our last session, we basically discussed about the internal component of a computer. Okay, in today's sessions, we're going to look at the computer system, the devices that makes up the computer system. Okay, so now that we've looked at the computer, the computer motherboard, it is good for us to basically take a look at this, the overview of this display board we have here. This is what we use basically to actually give students the insight about what how the operation, actually happens within the system case itself. So for us to basically make things very simple, we actually have a display board that actually display all the internal component of the system unit. So actually we'll start with the monitor. Of course, we label it as the monitor, as you can see, which is basically the display, gives us the output of whatever processing that is happening within this board, as you can see there. And on the left hand side of the board, we have at the top there, we basically refer to as a floppy drive. And the floppy drive, basically, this one you can find on most computers on recent lessons architecture these days, because it was actually used or designed on old computer motherboards. Basically, it's an input device and it can be a storage part as well. And we have the graphic card, which basically support our display. It has been configured, as we all see. It is an expansion slot on the computer motherboard itself. And we have basically here, this is basically referred to as what we call it the floppy diskette. Basically, it is a storage device. We use it to store information. It actually store up to 5 megabytes of data in early days when we're using computers, but nowadays it's actually not used. It was actually replaced with the CD and DVD discs, basically. And on the other side of the display board here, we have the main part of the computer, or what we refer to as the storage part, which is the primary storage part of the computer. We call it the hard drive. As you can see, it is actually called for short HDD on most desktop computers, but this one is actually an older version. As you can see, we're using an IDE slot lessons cable here, and that's the kind of hard drive we're talking about. We're not actually using these ones, of course, in these days. We're using the SATA kind of hard drives, which are more advanced and more faster than the IDE drive. And we have the SMP, basically. Of course, we all know when we see this man, we know what basically the function this man performs. It actually sent, AC volt into the computer motherboard in order for the computer to basically function. All these hardware components, for them to function, they actually rely on this particular man that we are looking at here, which is the SMPS. So we have this other type of storage device. Of course, we have the CD-ROM. We all know the DVD and CD-ROM. Of course, we all know this particular part enables us to installing softwares, drivers, and operating system into our computer. If most computer or desktop computers, let's say, comes without this particular part of the computer, then it will be very difficult for one to do basic operations. And of course, this man that I'm holding, we know we actually call this man as a CD or DVD, discs. Basically, we use them in this particular device in order for us to get information into the computer. Of course, we have the cooling system of the motherboard. Basically, I just want to throw light on this one. It's very important. It's actually on top of the CPU, of which you cannot see at the moment because we've already talked about that here. Okay, so we've looked at the cooling system here, and this is basically the fan. Of course, it supports the cooling system. Of course, underneath the fan, we'll find what we call the heatsink. Of course, we have, an example of a heatsink here. Of course, you can see it very clearly. So this is it. Basically, is underneath that particular area, and of course, this is just, an exact example of what we're looking at here. And underneath that, we have what we call the CPU, and here is basically referred to as the RAM slot. Of course, we've already talked about on these several times that it supports the processor for processing, because without this RAM, definitely the processor would find it very difficult in terms of processing data. And of course, we've already talked about the north and the south bridge, and of course, as you can see underneath this particular man that is here, which is basically a heat sink as well, is actually, we can find there the north bridge chip, and here we have the south bridge, and we have here the Cmos slot. Basically is not there, which is a battery that we've just talked about. Let me just put it here so you see what I'm trying to talk about. This is it, and enables us to actually keeps the computer system time up and running. And at the other end of this particular area, which is in support of the south bridge, basically support this region, which are basically the expansion slot. Of course, we connect our devices there. Of course, we've talked about this one is actually the audio part, and here we have this the Ethernet, and as well we have the USB slot there. And of course, this is our Vga
VGA port, you all know, we've talked about it. It's actually sent display to this man standing up at the top here. And we have, this is a parallel port. Of course, we're using it in older computers for what? For printers. And now it's no more in use. And we have the serial port, which was used for modem and other configuration. And here we have basically the PS2 port, I think it is here. You know, we actually use it to basically give information into the computer using the keyboard and the mouse, but they are no more in use on some computers these days. Of course, this is basically a complete overview of the computer motherboard and the hardware component within the system case. Okay, this session will end by taking a look at some of the components, again, of course, in the computer system. There are a lot of components, of course, within the computer system. As you can see, this is just a display of them, you know. So, it would be nice if you have actually get time, you come and actually take a look at some of the things that BroadCast College basically offer, and we'll be very glad to see you at BroadCast College. You feel free to basically contact BroadCast College. I'm John Ture. Thank you.